Welcome my little gourmets. So today we're going to have, I wonder what we're going to have. I wonder what we'll make. Oh, I don't know. How about we do biryani? Now, before those of you who are a bit more observant, have been following this series, go, we've done a biryani. Yes, we have. We did a chicken and rosewater biryani. Now, the thing is with biryani, there's loads of different versions all over India. We're going to talk later about the origins of biryani, but for now, we're just going to point out that there is a variety of biryanis. It depends what region of India you come from. So the one we're going to make is lamb, and it is a different recipe, if you like. I mean, obviously it's got the meat in it and it's got the lamb in it, you know, the rice in it, sorry, and it's cooked the traditional way. Again, we'll talk about that later, because actually we're not in the evening yet, because we've got to marinate the meat. So I've got some lamb and I've trimmed it a bit because there was quite a lot of fat and everything else like on that. So I've trimmed it. This will make sort of enough for like 3-ish to 4-ish people. All right. So there's some lamb. I've got my spice grinder, and we're going to grind up a few different spices, and we're going to add them to some natural yoghurt. Okay, and mix it all together and shove it in the fridge for at least 2 hours. And it's going to be longer than 2 hours for us. All right, so let's get started. Okay, so I'm going to start by just putting the meat to one side. Okay, and in my bowl where I'm going to mix all my meat and marinade, first off I'm going to grate about 25 grams. Oops, they have to use the right size of grater, doesn't it? About 25 grams of ginger. Now this is frozen, and if it weren't frozen I'd peel it, alright, but to be honest, don't really hurt, does it? So we're going to about 25 grams. So most of this here. Now there are some elements of this in terms of the spices and that are the same as the chicken and rosewater one, but there's going to be some differences. There's certainly difference in the marinade. Okay, so we're going to do the ginger. Okay, and then I've got a teaspoon of salt, so in that goes in there, and then I'm going to put in there about 3 or 4 cloves of crushed garlic. Okay, let's get that in there. So now the other spices, come here. The other spices are going to go, hey, that one's going on the floor. They're going to go into the grinder. Okay, and we're going to grind most of them up to a fine powder. And now this is when I forgot my knife, just to scrape that off. I have one of them. Okay, so that's ginger, salt. Now, if you've got some what we call long pepper, which is the traditional thing, okay, here's some long pepper for you. Okay, this wants to be ground up. Now, if you haven't got long pepper, you can use ordinary black pepper. All right, if you was using ordinary black pepper ground up, I'll chuck that in there now. All right, but I'm gonna, because these are whole, okay, I'm gonna put these in with the other spices. So the next thing we're gonna want is about 250 grams of natural yoghurt. Yeah, well, it doesn't come off, or it ain't all right. Okay, so about half this pot. Okay, so in that will go. That'll go in the fridge for on. So just give that a quick mix in. We will want to mix the other spices in. So that's that bit. Let me just clean up some of this mess, and we'll do the spice blend. Okay, so into my spice blend, I'm going to put about 10 green cardamom pods. Can't speak this morning. Green cardamom pods. Okay, these are getting a bit old, so they're not quite so green. Okay, about 5 cloves, and then 2 pieces of blade mace. Now mace is the bit that's around the nutmeg, okay, so that's going in there. And then take about a 10cm piece of cinnamon, and you'll need to just break that up just to get it into the blender. Okay, and then like I said, with the long pepper, because these are whole ones, I'm going to just break the stalk off and put them in there. Okay, some of them ain't got stalks on anyway. So you're going to want about just over ½ teaspoon of this. Now it is a slightly different flavour, peppery flavour to traditional pepper, and long pepper is the traditional pepper to use. You can get it in like Asian cook shops and things like that. Probably won't get it in Tesco, right? You can just blend it up. So we want this to a fine powder. It takes a little while to get that cinnamon done. Okay, so let me just blitz it all and then I'll show you the final ingredient. Okay, so that's that ground up to a nice fine powder. So the next thing we'll take is a dried Kashmiri chilli. Okay, now just take the stalk off, leave all the seeds in. You might need to just break that in half so it fits in there. And in fact, that's quite a small one, so I'm going to put another one in there. Let's get another small one. Oh, I can't find another small one. That'll do. Okay, and we'll now grind this up. Now this doesn't have to go all the way to a powder. Okay. And if you want, to be honest, sometimes I'll stick it all in with the others anyway. Okay, just give that a little bit more. Now then, we are almost there now in terms of the marinade. So here's my yoghurt mix, and what I'm going to do now is just tip that into there. Okay, and as always get a little bit sticking there. Okay, round the bottom. Let's get that all out. We're going to give this a mix together, and then we're going to chuck the meat in there. Now, like I said to you earlier, that lamb was a bit fatty in that, so I've trimmed it. Now, like I said, you want at least 2 hours marinade. This is going to probably don't get chilli in your eye. This is probably going to want, or not want. This is probably going to have. What time are we now? About 10 o'clock. This is going to have getting on for 5-6 hours. Okay, so that's that. In goes our meat. Now, if you were Jamie, of course, you wouldn't have bothered with a spoon. You'd have stuck your hands in and got it all mixed up that way. But I am Jamie. Wish I were with his money. So, that, once that's all mixed in and thoroughly coated, we'll go in the fridge, like I said, and that's it for now. Okay, so that's stage one. Now, the thing is with the biryani, it's a slow cooked dish, so we'll be starting the next stage, like I say, a bit later on this afternoon, well, early evening. Okay, and then it will go into the oven, where it will be cooking for the best part of 2 hours almost. Alright, so there we go. There's your marinade for your lamb biryani. So, welcome back. Our lamb biryani is nicely marinated for, how long is it? Oh, getting on 5 odd hours. Okay, so that's out of the fridge ready to go. Now we've got the rest of the ingredients prepared here. Got to do a little bit more prep, okay, although most things we just use as they are. But the final thing, a little bit of sort of like finishing touch, is we want to add some strips of roasted almonds. Now you can get some blanched almonds. If you're using blanched almonds, soak them for about 30 minutes and then drain them off and then slice them up before we roast them I'm using flaked almonds. All right, so all I'm going to do is essentially try and cut these into like strips, and then you can toast them in the oven. Okay, you can get your oven to about 200 and give them about 4 minutes in the oven. I'm going to do off in my little omelette pan. All right. Now the other thing that we'll need preparing, and that will need to be done before we start assembling the biryani, is we're using some essentially dried prunes. All right, but the official name for them is aloo Bokhara. Okay, these have got stones in, so I've got to de-stone them. It's not the most straightforward of things doing it when they're dried like this. You end up finding you either end up with like little bits of the stone, or you end up losing some of the prunes. So just to show you what they look like, there you go, there's one there. Okay, so it's just like a dried prune. Now you'd want about 20 of them, okay, but you also want some sultanas. Wife don't eat sultanas in food like this. You would normally have about 2 tablespoons of sultanas and about, like I say, 20 of them. So because we're not putting sultanas in, I'm adding some more dried prunes. And like I say, by the time you take the stones out, you lose a lot of them anyway. So I'm just going to carry on stripping these. All right. Actually, I might give you a little bit of info about a biryani. Like we said at the start, yes, we've made biryani before, but biryanis are found all over India. Okay, and each area sort of puts its own little sort of spin on it. It's essentially cooked the same way, which we'll come to. All right, but it's sort of differs in the spices and sometimes the type of meat, or if there is any meat at all in it. Okay. Now, one idea is that it came back in about 2nd century AD. Okay, that it was a meal that was devised by a woman known as Soru, and she apparently saw the military and thought they don't look very fit for fighting. They're no bloody good, they're all undernourished. So she devised this meal, which essentially is prepared the same way as you would normally now do a biryani. It's got ghee in it, clarified butter, we've got some of that there. Okay, rice. Traditionally it should be long grain rice, basmati rice, that sort of thing. Meat, turmeric, coriander, pepper. Okay, and a bay leaf. And apparently some say that's where the biryani was born. But the most accepted method comes a little bit later. But I'm going to let you hang on for that one. Alright, so I'm going to finish off slicing these up. Okay, there is a little hint of visible connected to a different origin story of the biryani. So catch you in a bit. Okay, so I've got me almonds thinly sliced, if you like, and what we're going to do, you notice something, fixed me up. Well, actually I partly fixed it. I think it's actually a combination of things went wrong with it, and I ended up only been able to get 2 of the igniters working, but I only really use this side anyway, so so what I'm going to do is, like I say, you can put these in the oven for about 3 or 4 minutes, okay, in a hot oven. I just thought it's quicker to do this. Now we will want the oven on, okay, because we assemble the biryani on the hob to begin with, and then it's going to cook in the oven for best part of 2 hours. Alright, so there's going to be a bit of an interval in this, a bit like there was between the marinade and this. So I'll try tossing these and I'll end up tossing them every bloody way, so I won't toss them. Alright, so we need the oven on about 160. Okay, so we'll get that preheating now. Put that on, yeah. And then we'll let these cool, and obviously we're not using these to the very end. We sprinkle these on at the end. Now, as well as obviously them aloo Bokhara, you're going to need some other spices. You want some full fat milk, about 125ml, plenty of crispy onions, rosewater again. We want 2 tablespoons of salt, no, 2 teaspoons, 2 teaspoons of salt. We want about 5 cloves, about 4 green cardamom pods again. So some of the things that went into the marinade we're putting into the rice and that, and some about half a teaspoon of cumin seeds. You'll want about half a teaspoon of saffron and 40 grams of ghee. Okay, and then the rice, 300 grams of rice. Now at the back there, I haven't got it on yet, but I've got 2 litres of water which we're going to cook the rice. Now we only part cook the rice because it cooks as part of the biryani. Some people used to argue, well, a biryani is nothing more than a pilaf or pulao. I don't know how you pronounce that one. It's not, it's different. It's a completely different cooking method. All right. So, so just gonna try and toss things a bit. So we need to move ahead. Right, we're talking about turn of 1600. Right, now similar story, but this one involves the Mughal Shah's queen. Okay, this was the Shah of Jahan, or however you pronounce it, I don't know. And his queen was Mumtaz Mahal. Got there yet? There yet? Now, she did a similar thing. She noticed that the military were looking very weak and undernourished, and she said, we need to come up with something to get them nourished and fit. And so, according to the Indian folklore, she's the one who came up with the idea of this well-nourishing meal with rice, so the carbohydrates, meat, you know, the protein and that sort of thing. And so she's usually credited as being the one who came up with the biryani. Now the Mughals originated from like Asia, from Persia. So the biryani has, like quite a lot of dishes in India, Persian elements to it and Persian influences. Now going back to the old queen, she's the one who's in there. Well, that was built for her anyway, for her tomb, Taj Mahal. When she died, he was so heartbroken, he built that for her. There you go. Anybody spot that? Right, so these are just about had enough time on here, so I'm going to turn that off. We're just going to let these cool, and then I'm going to take them out and we'll move on to the next stage. But what I'm going to start doing is destoning my dried prunes. That will take a little while. Okay, we're finally ready now to start getting on with it. Top tip for you. Destoning and them dried prunes takes forever. Do it early. Now, before we do anything else, I can take my saffron, okay, and that's going to go into the milk, right? So we'll just give that time to let that infuse a little bit. Now, if you remember, we were saying about how traditionally it's the queen who came up with this this thing. It is Persian in origin. The Mughals were from Persia, and the word biryan or biran is a Persian word. Okay, I need a beer. Which meant fried onion. Others say it's like a bran or branj, which meant rice. Who knows? But that makes sure don't pick up the saffron milk and drink that 1%. Not there's a problem with that. It's not beer, is it? But actually, Persia make a type of biryani, but they don't use rice in that. So they use all the other stuff, but they tend to have it like a flatbread type thing. But anyway, that's digressing. So in India, this particular one, so basically it then spread through all the different states of India, and up north it tends now to be quite subtle with their spices. Down south, much more spicy. Okay, now this particular lamb biryani comes from Bangladesh region. Okay, so sort of northish. So, pardon me. So the first thing is, I said we want to boil up 2 litres of water. Okay, see, I've got that one working. So I'll put the heat onto that, and then you're going to need a pan like that. We made the last biryani in. Okay, place fitting lid. We're going to be putting foil on it. So the first thing we want to do is we want to take our 40 grams of ghee. Okay, and melt that down. So look at that. There you go. So I'm just going to put that on gently, just enough to start melting it down. Okay. So we've got our saffron infused into the milk. Now, biryanis are cooked, again, according to a Mughal type technique, which is like a slow cook, dum packed. I'll probably pronounce it completely wrong, all right? But basically it just meant you cooked it slowly over a low heat. Hence the reason this is going to take getting on for 2 hours once we've sort of started assembling it. So we're going to melt that down, and we build it up in layers. Okay, now quite often you find that when you come, like we did with the other one, you come to like serve it and the colour hasn't necessarily mixed all through, so you need to give it a good old mix up at the end. So I told you we're going to need 300 grams of rice, and the idea being we start off with the sort of the meat spices, then we'll cook the rice for about 3 minutes, and then take the rice straight off, drain it, and then we start building up the rice on top. Right? So that's melting down. Got my spices ready, got my crispy onions. So I'll catch them when that's melted. Okay, that's melted down. Before we start with that, we're going to take our cumin seeds and we're going to chuck that in the water for the rice, and our cardamom pods in with the rice. Well, the rice ain't in there yet, but you walk for it. Our cloves and our 2 teaspoons of salt. Okay. And then we just need to wait for that to come up to like a rolling boil. Whatever bloody rolling boil is. We're just going to wait till it starts boiling. Right? So anyway, so that is now melted down. So we now take our, I'm going to call that pork then. Right? We now take our meat, okay, and we basically spread that over the bottom of the pan. Now we're not trying to cook it yet, because obviously, like we said, it's this cooking, slow cook, right? Now we put all the marinade. I mean, I normally find it's all pretty much stuck to the meat anyway, but everything goes in there. Like these silicone spatulas, I want. Scrape everything out. So we just spread that over the base of the pan. Now it looks like there's a lot of butter in there, a lot of ghee, well there is, right? But don't worry about that. And then now, if you remember the old what's named prunes, now we need to sprinkle these over the top. Now I'm going to do them. I'm not going to just tip them up because they're quite sticky, and they'll just all like that. What I did, they'll just all stick together. So now we just sprinkle these over the top of the meat. Okay. Get off. So you stick everywhere. And like I say, they're little bastards. It's probably a blunt bloody knife because the stones are quite hard. By the time these are dry, they're all mainly stone. It's quite difficult, some of them. Apart from one, out of all the ones I did, one like peeled perfectly, just like fell off the stone. Everything else, I'm scraping it all off, getting bits of stone. There's probably bits of stone in it. But anyway, so we sprinkle that over that. Okay, that's that done. Wash your hands because it's too sticky. Now, crispy onions. You would make about 600 grams of that, but I don't make it. I buy them in, right? So what we do now is we add about 2/3 of that, and we sprinkle that again over the top. All right. So a good generous portion of these crispy onions, crispy shallots. Now, we're going to be adding some more of them on, right? But for now, that's ready for the rice. So I'm going to turn the heat off on that. So now it's just a matter of waiting for that to come up to the boil, okay? And until we're ready to put our rice in there, not much else we can do. So our oven's getting hot. That's a few little lumps in there. That's all ready for the rice layer. So go and get yourself a beer or something. Right, I've got one here. Better take it easy. I've got to come back in like 2 hours, haven't I, and finish it off. Okay, the rice is boiling. Okay, the water's boiling for the rice. So now I'm going to take my 300 grams of basmati or long grain rice. Okay, and we're just going to sort of gradually sprinkle that into the water, and then wait till it comes back to the boil. Okay, at which point we're going to cook it for 3 minutes. Okay, and then we're going to drain it off. Now I would suggest at that point you're trying to wick out the cardamom pods and the cloves. All right, you don't really want to be biting onto them, but if you can't get them out, you can't get them out here. So obviously this biryani's got meat in it. The last biryani we cooked got meat in it. Not all biryanis have meat. So although that was traditional, the Mughal sort of biryani was a meat-based dish. Well, I say meat-based. You got meat in it. Obviously, if you were Hindu, you were vegetarian. So Hindus make a different version that doesn't have meat in it. It has sort of other vegetables in it. Quite often, they swap the meat for potatoes. All right. And quite often you can find that as street food, apparently. Although we were told when we went to India, don't eat street food. Don't eat anything that ain't sealed in something, and even then be a bit wary. I could tell you a story about the toilet that was at the back of the kitchen, and the cow that came through, because cows go everywhere, don't they? And the goat in the kitchen, live goat. And if you pick the wrong toilet, you could be seen outside of the kitchen. But anyway, that's a different story. Right, so that's just starting to come up to the boil again. So, Alexa, you old tart, set a timer for 3 minutes.
3 minutes, starting now.
She knows her place. Okay, so when the old girl tells me, I'll come back to you. Okay then, so the old tart will be telling me in a minute. Time to go take that off. And like I said, I'll try and wick out some of the cardamom pods and the cloves. Alexa, stop. So that goes off. Okay, and there's a couple of cloves there. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'll shove this through the colander, and we just shove these in there out of the way. Another one. Another one. Oops, where's the one? It's escaping. So, got the rice draining. We've got liquid in there, or we will have more liquid in a bit. Okay, so we're nicely drained. and get the handles off. And what we're going to do is we're going to take half the rice and layer that on top. Okay, so just make all that over. There's a clove. You little bastard. Get here. Right, so that's gone on there. Now we take our rose water. Now it says like 3 teaspoons of it, but to be honest, that never really does much. But what you're going to do is you're going to sprinkle some rose water over the top of that. Okay, and then we take the rest of the rice and we put the rest of the rice over it. So let's just get them cloves out. There's one. Ooh, that's hot. Let's just chuck them out of the way for now. Get in there. So the rest of the rice goes on. Another clove. Get out. Oops, that went flying. So just lay that over the top. We give one more little sprinkle of rosewater. Okay. Made a bit of a mistake with Amazon. I bought another bottle. I bought my first lot from Asian Cook Shop, but because of the old COVID thing, they've not really been open an awful lot. So I bought that and didn't realise. Look at a tiny little bottle like that. It was a bloody great thing I had before. Now we take our saffron infused milk and we basically pour that over the top. Okay. Now our final step is to turn the heat back on, and we want to bring that up to a boil. And it's going to be a bit difficult to see it boiling, all right? But you can probably hear it. Once that's boiled, turn the heat off, and when it's going to cover it, and that's then when it goes for its 1 3/4 hours in the oven. All right. So our rose water is finished with. Our crispy onions go on top when we serve it, as do our roasted strips of almond. Okay. So almost ready for the oven. Okay, so that's up to the boil. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to put some foil over the top of it. Okay, and then we're going to put a lid on top of that. Okay, so that now, like I say, goes in that oven. And by the way, make sure you put your shelf low enough so you can fit your pot in. So in that goes, and like I say, that is now going to cook for 1 hour and 3/4. So you've got time just to watch a film. Well, actually, most films nowadays 2 hours, aren't they? You might have to miss the end. It don't matter. Depends what film you're watching. All right. So getting a bit warm in here. All tight in the door, I suppose. But anyway, I'll catch you in about 1 hour and a half or so. Well, run out of beer, so we're on the wine, white wine. It's our normal white wine that we're having at the minute. Very nice. So, 1 hour and 3/4 are gone. Whoops. Turn off the oven. Turn it up to where I normally have it, so I don't forget tomorrow. So, let's get it out. Check it out. So, this has been simmering there since we started. And like I said, what tends to happen is you get a little bit of sort of like the liquidy coming through. And we just put that in recycling. And don't forget to hold it with a cloth. But it really needs a little bit of a stir up. It does tend to sort of catch on the edges and the bottom. Okay, but we'll just give it a bit of a mix in. We've got the yellow from the saffron come through. The meat looks nice and tender, it's breaking up. So let's some lot of heat coming off of this. So let's try it out. Okay, so got a plate here. Let's put a little bit on, and then what we do is I'll be adding some more to that later because this is mine. Right. We add a little sprinkle of crispy onions, and we add a little sprinkle of the roasted almonds, and there we have our Bangladeshi Lamb Biryani. Let's try a bit of lamb, okay? Nice and tender. You then get the kick of the spices. Almost sounds like a tangy taste to it. I'm not quite sure what spice that is. Bit of rice. So the onions and almonds give it a little bit of a crunch, because obviously without them there isn't anything crunchy left in it. So, very, very nice. And there'll be some leftovers for tomorrow, for Ron. Ron can have some. Alright, so that's our lamb biryani. And now I'm going to go and eat it. And the wife's moaning because she says she's hungry and she's starving and she hasn't had anything to eat and blah, 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 blah. So, see you next week.